We have been talking through this idea of the subtle sovereignty of God as we have been studying Esther, and today is our final message in the book of Esther. And it's always bittersweet when you finish studying a book. I hope you've enjoyed the study. I've enjoyed studying Esther personally. It's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. And we finish in celebration as we think about the institution of Purim and what that meant. And as to do that, we're going to focus and think about this subject, reveling and resting in the subtle sovereignty of God. And I want to begin by reading something to you. Tired, starved, downtrodden, we Jewish prisoners plodded into the barracks where we spent a few miserable hours on hard bunks before another day of back-breaking labor. We were too exhausted to think. When our minds wandered back to times long gone, we could not help but wonder if it had all been a dream. Would we ever live again as we once had before our parents and children had been murdered? And we were dropped into an unending, hellish existence where death seemed to be a welcome and inevitable reprieve. It was Purim Eve, but what was there for us to celebrate in the German concentration camp of Gross Rosen? Suddenly, one of us leaped down from his small space on the bunk and began an impassioned speech that will forever remain in my memory. My fellow Jews, he called out, dear brothers in suffering, today is Purim. When we remember the miracles God did for our ancestors, he who dwells in heaven saved our nation from being decimated. The enemy fell into the pit that he himself had dug. Today we once again have a double-edged sword pressed against our necks. Our enemies are trying to destroy us, but do not allow terror into your hearts. The Haman of our day, Hitler, and his lackeys will not be able to overcome God's chosen. The eternity of Israel will not die. The bells of freedom are already ringing in the distance. We will yet live to see justice meted out against our enemies, just like our ancestors in Shushan of old. Be strong, brothers. The Jewish nation lives on. Beads of sweat appeared on his face. His lips trembled, his eyes glinted, but he said no more. Then another prisoner jumped down from his bunk and took his place next to the orator. Sweetly, with a voice laden with nostalgia and hope, he sang the words of the blessing said after the Megillah reading, which is the reading of Esther, in which we thank God who, quote, fights our battles and pays comeuppance to our mortal enemies. As the rest of us absorbed the last echoes of the tune, the two men lightly climbed back into their spots on the tiered bunk, and silence reigned once again. If you've ever been to the Holy Land, I've been a couple of times, and if you've ever gotten to go to Yad Vashem, which is a Holocaust museum, it's an incredibly eerie experience at the very outset. You walk through a hall as you enter down, you kind of walk down in, and it's all completely dark, and you're basically in a hall of mirrors, but it's dark, and it's lights all up around you, and you're hearing the voice of children, and along the way are placards and statements and brief biographies of children. And the first entry represents all of the children who were killed in the Holocaust. It's an incredible way of entering into the museum itself. It's a staggering thing to think about God rescuing a whole people from annihilation, and then a people moving forward, clinging to that. There's obvious relations to us. I hope there's obvious relations to us. I'm not sure, in some ways, the way that Christians live their lives, that there are obvious relations to us. And that's what we're after this morning, is to make the connection, to see that for all of eternity, you have been rescued from destruction, and that ought to do something for you, that ought to stir you, that ought to bring about a kind of celebration for you, that ought to weigh in such a way that has a paradoxical heaviness and lightness at the same time, where you feel the gravitas of it and it lifts you off your feet. where you celebrate the goodness of the rescue of God and find the capacity to revel in that rescue. I want to look with you at Esther 9, and we're going to pick up our time looking at Esther 9, verse 20. We finished off in verse 19. The Jews have just responded to their enemies in self-defense, and Purim will now be instituted as a memorial, a festival of remembrance moving forward that the nation will pull on in various times. And there's an incredible analogy for us. In fact, Purim was just celebrated earlier this month. The month of Adar in the Hebrew calendar ends at the beginning in the early portion of March, and so they just celebrated it. They will begin celebrating it usually a couple of Sabbaths before, Sabbath of Shekels it's called. And they'll move forward, and then they'll celebrate that Sabbath right before, and they'll begin to give gifts and send gifts out to people. All different kinds of gift baskets and things like that. They'll fast the night before the celebration. Jews will fast, they'll abstain from sexual activity, and then on that day of celebration will begin a day of revelry, and that day will begin by reading the story of Esther. And they'll read that story, and then they will party, and party hard. And they will celebrate, and they will celebrate on the 14th, and then only on the 15th they'll celebrate in the walled city of Jerusalem, right? And that's to commemorate the difference between Susa and the rural celebration. And they do that to this day. Everybody celebrates on the 14th of Adar, except in Jerusalem they celebrate on the 15th. We want to look at this celebration this morning and spend a little bit time with it. Verse 20. And I'm going to go through, and as we've done with some messages here through Esther, we'll read through the text, make a couple of comments, and then I want to bring this to application about God's rescue for our lives with some thoughts that I hope will be relevant for you. Verse 20. And Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them to keep the 14th day of the month of Adar, also the 15th day of the same year by year. He's not prescribing that you celebrate it 2 days. He's saying those of you who are celebrating on the 14th, you celebrate it. Those of you celebrating on the 15th, you celebrate it. Celebrate the victory that God has brought in rescuing his people from the hand of Haman and from the impending destruction and annihilation instituted by him under Ahasuerus and Xerxes. As the days on which the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and gladness, days for sending gifts of food to one another and gifts to the poor. This is like the big food item, by the way. At Purim, they send Hamantaschen. Mantaschen was a German food. Mantaschen means poppy seed, man pocket taschen. So a Hamantaschen is a Haman pocket. Right? Like it feels like a part of like a Jim Gaffigan skit about Hot Pockets or something. But it's a Haman pocket. Now it has three, you notice they're all triangulated. For some reason in Jewish history, we have nothing to verify this, but legends build, right, from real events. And for some reason in Jewish history, it was thought that Haman wore a hat that had 3 points on it. It was triangular, right? Sort of like a maybe Paul Revere kind of thing, right? And he had a hat like that, and so it became a thing that you would take these poppy seed pockets and you'd fill them with all kinds of stuff, and you would take the dough and turn it over and fill it with they do all kinds of stuff. They look fantastic. I'd like to try one. But these are the central pieces. They'll send baskets, but they definitely send the cookies, and they're a well-known piece that are sent, these gifts. given to the poor and to one another. So the Jews accepted what they had started to do and what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman. Oh, I know. That's the right response. Now, here's what they also do. Anytime when Esther is read and the word Haman comes, they drowned out the noise of Haman, because Haman was the one who tried to annihilate him. This is called a grogger. And so they take these groggers, and when Haman is mentioned, I like that, right? Wouldn't you like to do this when your kids start to ask you questions at home? You've said yes or no for the 9,000th time. They're asking the 9,001 time. All right? Anyway. I've been waiting 2 weeks to use this sucker. Just so you know. All right? How great is that? I love that. All right. When Haman is mentioned, that's what happens. For Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur. That's not a kitten. That is cast lots. It's the word for casting lots, which was took different shapes and forms in different cultures. In a Persian culture, it's actually pretty similar to throwing dice. And I showed you up here in an earlier message what a pur looked like, and it was basically like a dice with sort of markings on each side, and they would cast that, and they cast that in this context for different periods of the month when they would annihilate the Jews, and it ended up falling on Adar, the last month, to crush and to destroy them. But when it came before the king, he gave orders in writing that his evil plan that he had devised against the Jews should return on his own head. So verse 24-25 is sort of giving a little summary. This letter goes out. The narrator now is just giving us a little summary of, hey, remember Haman tried to destroy us all? And remember that they cast lots, but remember, as the king gave orders, something changed. He had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that his son should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore, they called these days Purim, after the term Pur. Therefore, because of all that was written in this letter, and of what they had faced in this matter, and of what had happened to them, the Jews firmly obligated themselves and their offspring and all who joined them, that without fail they would keep these 2 days according to what was written and at the time appointed every year, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation in every clan, province, and city, and that these days of Purim should never fall into disuse among the Jews, nor should the commemoration of these days cease among their descendants. So, go back to verse 26. The basis of this festival is this pronouncement that goes out, he says. He says it also in verse 26 is the reality of what they'd faced. He says it also in verse 26 is that they actually didn't face that reality. That they were going to be destroyed, but they weren't. So a decree goes out, written down, that when they would read it, they would celebrate, they would memorialize, they would revel in the rescue that God had afforded them. Listen to me. This, for us, it should immediately take us to the gospel of Christ. This should immediately take us to the fact that we were destined for destruction, but God, having loved us so much, gave his Son so that we could have life while we were yet sinners. He died in our place, and so that when we read the gospel story, it is supposed to emit a kind of overwhelming celebratory gratitude. That's supposed to be our first impulse. It's never supposed to be same old, same old. It's supposed to be a celebration. It's supposed to be a glorification of God, an exaltation of his name, and we're supposed to be staggered by it. More about that in a moment. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew gave full written authority confirming this second letter. I think scholars look and think this word second may have been in addition to the text later on. It doesn't seem like it fits and maps to the original. I think probably what this originally read was something like, gave full written authority confirming this letter about Purim. The idea is this letter's going out, and as the letter is going out about Purim, it's coming with royal authority. Esther is getting behind it so that all the Jews are supposed to say, see, this came from royal authority, and Mordecai is risen to a place of prominence, and so out of this they're supposed to feel the weight of authority. But I want you to keep in mind, as he writes, he's obliging them, was the language that we read. Obliging is different than a command. Intentionally, it doesn't say command. He's not saying this is now a new law that you have to do this. What he's saying essentially is, do you feel the weight of what you were rescued from? Do you feel its gravitas? How should we not celebrate? How should we not extol the wonder of this rescue? Letters were sent to all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus. That's mentioned in chapter 1, verse 1. First verse in Esther mentions these 127 provinces, mentioned again in chapter 8. In words of peace and truth, that these days of Purim should be observed and that their appointed seasons, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther obligated them, sent the message that this is what we ought to do, an exhortation. And as they had obligated themselves and their offspring with regard to their fasts and their lamenting, the command of Esther confirmed these practices of Purim, and it was recorded in writing. And then you get what's called an encomium in literature. Sometimes things end with a kind of crescendoed exaltation of a particular character within a story. And this is an encomium to Mordecai. King Ahasuerus imposed tax on the land and on the coastlands of the sea. It's difficult to know in Hebrew whether the term means he imposed tax on them or he forced labor. It's difficult to tell. Why would this text even start in this little encomium start there and say that? Because there's a revisiting in this first verse of the greatness, majesty, control, power, scope, just in this little sentence of Xerxes or Ahasuerus. And the reason for that is because the author is going to conclude with a crescendo about Mordecai, who is second to him. And as he lifts up Xerxes, it's as though he's exalting Mordecai to say, can you believe in this vast empire that God took a people, broken, destined for destruction, a guy that was tearing his clothes, fasting in sackcloth at the king's gate, and now he's risen up to prominence right here? So it's a statement about the power and scope of Ahasuerus and all the acts of his power and might, King Ahasuerus, and the full account of the high honor of Mordecai. He brings him right along beside the king to which the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Ahasuerus. And he was great among the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brothers, for he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his people. The final crescendo there for Mordecai is actually kind of in what's called intertextuality. If you look at a bunch of other Old Testament texts, there's a bunch of connection points that are made here, right? It reminds us in Genesis 49 of Joseph being brought up in second, right here, right brought up next to in rank. It reminds us of Jonathan, who is, David tells him, you'll be right next to me, second next to me. The same language is used later of Elkanah. You have connections even in the idea of, are not all these things written in the Chronicles of the Medes and the Persians, kings of the Medes and the Persians? That's the same way that Jews would have been familiar with the language when you read through Kings and Chronicles of their own kings. What's the point? The point is to show that Mordecai had a kind of kingly status for the rest of his time moving forward to secure peace and well-being for the Jews. That this was a rescue, but it was not just a rescue. It was a rescue with a resource for shalom moving forward, right? So this is so analogous to us for the gospel. The gospel is us as God's people rescued by him from doom and destruction. We've seen it all throughout Esther. You've seen how Mordecai is in that way a kind of a type of Christ. He comes and is called into this dynamic. Esther even has typological leanings where she stands in the gap, and they represent God's emissaries to rescue his people. And of course, this is analogous to Jesus and his rescue of us. And what I want to do is bring some direct application to us with a few thoughts on reveling and resting in the subtle sovereignty of God. You go throughout your life, and on a daily basis, you pray that God would, and you fill in the blank. And there are mild things attached to that sometimes, and there are huge things attached to that, life-defining things attached to that. There are new burdens that come on, and there are old burdens. There are things that you are optimistic about when you pray, and you feel a sense of maybe God will and faith, and then you have things that you have come again and again and again, and you don't want to tell anybody this, but you feel so pessimistic when you pray that it's just sufficient for you to get the words out. Because you're supposed to say, no, God will do it. God can show up. But deep in, you go, I don't think so. I don't think so. I want to think about thoughts about that. I want to think about thoughts about us going back in to gospel, to think about that as a basis from which we can sort of tie ourselves off to, anchor ourselves to that rescue and say, if he rescued my sorry tale from destruction and my incessant rebellion against him, God, help me not to be pessimistic about the other things either, right? So we got to celebrate, and we got to get back and kind of more and anchor ourselves in a way back there. But the reason it's subtle sovereignty is because for the most part, you don't see the finger of God coming out of the sky. Fire isn't falling from heaven. Things are shifting in different ways. You have to have eyes to see. Eyes to see. Esther teaches us that. Esther teaches us that there's a hand behind the external movements of what God is doing, and that it's never just what you see, but there's always more taking place behind. So let's look and just contemplate a couple of thoughts. And we're going to run to a few other texts. God is fully responsible, number one. First thought. God is fully responsible for our rescue and relief from destruction. Don't miss it. God is, I just want to remind you of one statement in Scripture. It's Jonah 2:9, the last line of Jonah 2:9. He gets pulled out of the waters. He gets spat up on land. And he says, salvation is of the Lord. It's just that statement. Salvation is of the Lord. Now that's not just a statement about God's the initiator of it. It is that, but it's not just that. It's a totalitizing statement. It's a statement that it is all of God. From May 10th, 1857, listen to the words of Spurgeon. He preached a sermon on that phrase, salvation is of the Lord, Jonah. Here's how he started the sermon. Jonah learned this sentence of good theology in a strange college. He learned it in the whale's belly, at the bottom of the mountains, with the weeds wrapped about his head, when he supposed that the earth with her bars was about him forever. In fact, I got it pulled up here for you. Most of the grand truths of God have to be learned by trouble. They must be burned into us with the hot iron of affliction. Otherwise, we shall not truly receive them. Now, I wish it was different, But you know darn well, so do I, that he's 100% on. We do not learn in seasons of plenty and abundance the way we learn when we get stripped down. No man is competent to judge in matters of the kingdom until he first has been tried. Since there are many things to be learned in the depths which we can never know in the heights, we can discover many secrets in the caverns of the ocean, which though we had soared to heaven, we never could have known. God has allowed you in your life, I hope, to get to the end of yourself, and I hope what you found at the end of that rope was Him. And that was all His doing. Don't ever take God off the hook for negativity in your life. I'm so weary by hearing Bible teachers, hearing Christians talk like they got to somehow get God off the hook about negativity in their life and somehow staple God on the positivity of every Hallmark card they could ever imagine in their life. God is happy to be on the hook for the difficulty that comes in your life. It's not because He's sadistic. It's not because He's using you like a puppet. It's not because you're His voodoo doll. It is because He is laboring intensively to form you, and when you don't even want to be formed, He will form you still. He's out for you. He's on the hunt for you. And that is good news, because He's the only one who can shape you. He's the only one who can make you. He's the only one who can mold you. He's the only one who can gift you what you need. Salvation is of the Lord, and that's a good thing. Secondly, celebrating our rescue and relief from destruction is the natural response of people who've received it. Here's the thing. Not everybody responds that way. This is the oddity. But the most natural thing in the world. How do you see this here? Look at verse 23 in chapter 9. Mordecai is going to send out this thing telling them what they need to change your mourning, in a holiday, shift into gladness and dancing and so forth. And then we read verse 23. So the Jews accepted what they had started to do. See that? Mordecai sent it and they didn't go, oh, wait, Mordecai's super powerful now. All right, well, we'll be in trouble if we don't. We better celebrate. They'd already started. They could have written back, Mordecai, you're a little late to the party. It's already going down, brother. We're already going after it. This is why they were not commanded, they were obliged. It was the obvious thing. They'd been rescued. And all he's saying is this, you're partying like it's, to quote the great, I can't remember what band sang it, but you're partying like it's 1999. Remember that song? You're going to party like it's 19, that's what you're doing. You're partying like it's 1999. Now, keep doing it. And let's institute it. So every year you celebrate. Last week, we had communion, right? And I've told you before, I understand there's a health to sober reflection about the fact that as a sinner, you've been brought to this place where God would apply the benefits of the death of Christ to your life. But it's called Eucharist for a reason, because it's a giving of thanks. And if you walk back after celebrating the elements and you walk out of here and you're the frozen chosen and you're somber all around you, you've missed the point. You're supposed to celebrate that this thing was applied to your life and you did nothing to deserve it. It's the most natural thing in the world. So I got to thinking about this and I thought, well, what is it then that keeps us from celebrating it? Why sometimes, if it's such a celebration is not our natural response, why would that be? Here's two big reasons. Here's the first one. We have ingratitude. We're just ungrateful people. We haven't thought of the magnitude of it. We've gotten caught up trying to live day to day, and we're not thinking enough about the gratitude that we ought to have for the wonderful rescue that God has afforded. Look at Luke 17 up on the screen. On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. This is Jesus. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance, lifted up their voices, saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. To say have mercy on us means you are in a bad way. I used to repeat that prayer. A decade ago, I was in the throes of anxiety. Horrible experience. Horrible experience. Prolonged, months long, Nothing to pray but Jesus have mercy, Jesus have mercy, Jesus have mercy. When you know you're in need, that's what you pray. I'm in a pitiful spot. Pour it out on me. When he saw them, he said to them, go and show yourself to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back and praising God with a loud voice, he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. The text is trying to give you the point. He's the most unlikely person to come back. Then Jesus answered, were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? And he said, rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well. The astonishment of Jesus to go, what? Are you serious? You're the only cat that came back? These guys, their entire life, they couldn't go into town. They were marginalized. Nobody would touch them. You imagine going for years without another human touching you, your body, what that does to a human soul. And now they're cleansed, they can get reinstituted in society, everything's back, they can get a job, they can connect with family, they can gather around, they can go to the synagogue. All of these things emerge because of what he did, and they go, see ya. Where would you be? Where would you be right now if it weren't for the grace of God? Where would you be? I mean, you got to think about it. Where would you be? You feel that when you walk down and take those elements? I mean, does that texturize you at all? You walk in here and worship on resurrection, every day, Sunday's resurrection day, man. The Lord's Day. You come in, do you think, what am I doing here? And you get to sing praises to the Love you, Lord, lift my voice, I worship you. The souls rejoice, kiss him on the inside. Or do you celebrate? I'm easy to get down with the Lord because you are so overwhelmed by what he's done. See, I think the casual, everyday, same old is a reflection of a deep, embedded, entitled sense that yields itself to ingratitude in our life that we need to repent of and get fresh with it again. Now, you may have another problem. You may not be the only one. You might be a moralist because you think you're better than you are. You right now you've lost acquaintance with how bad you are. And you've tried to not think about that because you're in the day and age of positive thinking. And you've been watching Dr. Phil and Oprah too much. And you want to get in that vibe. Right? Instead of recognizing who you are before the Lord without the Lord over your life. Without the robe of his righteousness upon you. Romans 2, 1-5. This is after, in Romans 1, he has concluded the chapter by enumerating a number of vices that fill the living of rebellious creatures. He says, therefore you have no excuse, O man, every one of you who judges. He sort of turns, right? He sort of turns. I remember years ago I was in a counseling situation in my office. This is a long, long time ago. No idea where these people are now. But we're talking. And bless her heart, this girl, she had a truckload of issues in her life. She really did. And this guy, he really wanted me to fix her. That's really what I think the whole thing was about. I think he just wanted me to figure out how a old pastor could fix her. So I'm talking to her about something, talking to him. And I look at her and I say something. And apparently I struck a chord. Apparently I hit something that's really been bugging him for a long time. And he looks up at me and he goes, bingo. I said, what? Bingo. So I stopped, I looked at him, I said, well, hold on a second, I'm about to bingo you back. This guy had so out of touch with his own contributions to the demise of what's sitting here in front of him. He had no clue what was happening, right? Because he's taking the moral high ground in regard to what he perceives as the moral low ground. He's the elder brother looking down. He says, you who are like that, immoral, chapter 1. Oh, you guys that think you're the bee's knees. You think you're the best thing since Lay's potato chips. You guys, let me talk to you in chapter 2. No excuse. Oh man, every one of you judges, for in passing judgment on another, you condemn yourself. Because you, the judge, practice the very same things. We know that the judgment of God rightly falls on those who practice such things. Do you suppose, oh man, you who judge those who practice such things and yet do them yourself, that you will escape the judgment of God? Or do you, and this is the key word, presume? The Greek word means to despise, to scorn, to degrade. Do you degrade, downgrade, despise, and scorn the riches of his kindness and the forbearance and patience, not knowing that God's kindness is meant to lead you to repentance, but because of your hard and impenitent heart, you're storing up wrath for yourself on the day of wrath when God's judgment, righteous judgment will reveal? You're so busy talking about how bad the world is. It's all going to hell in a handbasket. Times have changed since I was a kid, I'll tell you what. I mean, man alive, the United States is not the United States I grew up in. No kidding. That's a low-hanging fruit. Does that even need to be said? It's like saying, hey, there's oxygen around. Just an insight to the world. Of course, it's obvious. Here's what's not obvious to you. The sin you see in the mirror, because you don't see it. It's not obvious what your spouse feels, because they feel it. It's not obvious what your kids feel, because they feel it. It's not obvious to you what others see, because they see it. But you're clipping along, presuming upon his patience and forbearance. Right? Just don't get it. You don't get the fact that you are jacked up and God in Christ came to rescue you. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful that you would come to the gospel as a sinner and you would leave, and you think you'll leave as a saint. No, you'll leave as a sinful saint. That's what's beautiful. Because you'll leave as a sinful saint and his love is going to go right with you in the midst of all that. Celebrate. Celebrating our rescue and relief is a communal process. This is why we get together. This is why we come together. This is why you don't just sit at home. You come together as the people of God incarnationally here, and we celebrate. This goes out. Mordecai's letter goes out. Esther's letter goes out to people saying, get together, everybody. Let's oblige ourselves to the reality that we were rescued, and let's celebrate it together. You come together in worship because of the goodness of the gospel. Donald Whitney, who wrote the book Spiritual Disciplines for the Christian Life, great, great guy. Don says this in an article that I read, a little devotional he wrote. I love it, called The Gospel and Worship. And these are a couple excerpts. The gospel takes the natural worldly view that worship is a person justifying himself by reaching up to God and corrects it with the truth that worship is a person responding to the God who has reached down through the gospel of Jesus Christ. Every time you sing a worship song, you are responding, not initiating. You see that? You're responding to a God that is extended to you. People do not decide to become worshipers of God. Rather, the gospel produces worshipers. God, through the gospel, changes a person's nature such that worship changes from mere participation in outward forms of veneration into adoration and enjoyment of God from the heart. Love of God, the gospel and love of worshiping the God of the gospel are inseparable. A true grasp of the former, right, the love of the gospel, leads to devotion of the latter, to the latter. Why do you worship? Why do you worship? Because he rescued you. Why do you worship? Because he saved you. Why do you worship? Because you came down a sinner and you return a sinful saint. You worship because you did nothing to earn it. Nothing. If you worship because you have been sort of awesome this week, stay home. That is not why we come to worship. We don't come to worship to regale each other with stories. I don't say to my brother Jerry, there was this time this week I was a real nut job. Let me tell you about it. It was crazy, but Jesus still loves me. I'm not reveling in the fact that I've got sin. But what I am doing is coming as a real me, right? To a real gospel and walking away and feeling real good because he has blessed. So we celebrate together. Number 4. Celebrating our rescue and relief is closely tied to blessing others because we've experienced blessing. So you need to make Purim cookies for me. Okay? Let's close in prayer. No, that's not the point, just making Purim cookies. What's the point? The point is that we give out of a rehearsed gospel. Purim, this is why they were given. Why did they say, you know the thing you got to do? Think about it. Here's what I want you to do. You've been rescued. Now, give gifts to each other. That's what he says. That's the obligation. You've been rescued, so give gifts to each other. Why? Because if you've received something and you're grateful, then it just flows out. It flows out. See, a gospel-centric community can't harbor bitterness. You just can't. The gospel bomb exploded in you. You can't harbor that. You feel at such discord with that because you know that is the most unnatural thing to do because you have received grace. And now you would wait. Now you'd hold it. Now you would be a hoarder of it. Now you wouldn't dispense it. Now you'd dam it up around you and you'd revel in it, just you and God, and you wouldn't dispense kindness and mercy and love and service. Verse 22, the last part in chapter 9 says that they should make them days of feasting, gladness, days for sending gifts of food to one another. And I love this, especially it highlights gifts to the poor. Why that? Because he chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. Right? You were marginalized. Before coming to Christ, you weren't all that in a bag of chips, but you came. And he took the marginalized and moved them into being a minister. He took the broken and turned them to being blessed. And now you look for people who are broken. I mean, you go hunting for people who are hurting. And you figure out how you can enter their story. Not in a you made your bed lie in it. Not in a condemnation. Not in an I told you so. In a I've made my bed lots of times and had to lie in it. Can I come sit with you? Can I dispense grace to you as one who has received grace and mercy? Paul in Galatians 5, for you were called to freedom, brothers. And he just paused for a second. He's telling him, like, you're no longer under law, right? Freedom. Now, a carnal heart will take freedom and say, I got freedom. I can do whatever I want, brother. It's all grace, baby. It's what the goodness of the gospel is. Redneck theology. That's how they all talk. No, that's not what you use your freedom for. He tells you, look, you got freedom. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. What are you free to do? You're free to do something you were never free to do. You're free to live out of gratitude. But through love, serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The truly free person is the one who gives. The truly free person is the one who doesn't have to hoard. The truly free person is the one who doesn't have to hold tight. They hold loose. They do that with stuff, and they do that with emotion, and they do that with relationship, and they do that with time, and they do that with wants, and you fill it in. They just are people of the open hand. That's, if anything has defined throughout history authentic Christianity, it has been that in terms of culture, we have been the people of the open hand. It's defined it. It's molded it. It literally, you can study the history. It shaped Western civilization, right? I mean, I'm happy for you to take me to First Atheist Hospital of Utah. Of anywhere. Right? But I can't hardly swing a cat and not hit a hospital that was founded by people of the open hand. Right? If you took away the charitable giving of Christians in the United States, the studies show us how surreal the landscape would change. The studies show us that because they're people of the open hand. That's what we're called to be. People of the open hand. We celebrate by dispensing. Number 5, nothing is random with our sovereign God. What feels like the most random thing in the world? Rolling dice. I mean, you don't, none of us do that. Hey, where do you guys want to go on vacation? I don't know. It looks like we're going to Bluffdale. You know, I mean, like, we don't do things like that. Who are you going to marry? Lucky sixes. Oh, snake eyes. Bummer. You don't do that in your life. Instead, we have different ways we go. Nothing seems more random than die. And yet, here you have, they cast the lot, and God's subtle sovereignty pervades even over the lot. And by the way, the Bible tells you this. Proverbs 16:33. The lot is cast in the lap, but it's every decision. It's from the Lord. God and God alone is the one who decides. See, this is why you can't get God off the hook for even negativity that you experience. Because God is sovereign, and it's happening in your life for reasons that He's moving and shaping and shifting. Psalm 16, 5 through 6, you say, I don't like my life. Well, the Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places indeed. I have a beautiful inheritance, subtle though His sovereignty may be. God remains in control. Where the lines have fallen, where my life is at, that is from Him. Nothing is random with our sovereign God. So you have to realize He has a bigger story. You have to realize He's working things out. Number 6, we should resolve to remember and pass that remembrance down generationally. Multi-generational fidelity starts and ends with what we started up here with. This young couple, right? This little guy. Whole story is going to be written by this little guy. Not a person in this room can say almost anything about what that story will look like. Right? I mean, whose story here has ended just as you thought it would? Or is going just as you thought it would? It doesn't. Who knows? But God knows. He is aware. And what we practiced is this notion that we're committed to the idea that Isaac will be a man of God. That Kayla will be a woman of God. You realize that's what we said. What we said is that that couple that could have stayed in their seed, that couple that could have just come Sunday morning, decided, we're going to come up here. And in coming up here, they said, we have intentions, and we want you to know what the intentions are. It's a bold statement, by the way. What the intentions? See, and now we get to pray. Now we get to come behind. Now we get to support. Now we get to lay down all judgment and move with a gospel grace toward a young family and say, now, what is it? How can we help you remember this so he remembers this? So then one day he stands up on a stage with his little one, goes, remember this. And it goes, and it goes, and it goes, and it goes. Right? There's a reason why baptisms are little nuanced around the world, but principally the same kind of thing. There's a reason why the Eucharist is the same kind of thing. There's a reason why we get up in churches all over the world on Sunday morning are doing the same kind of thing, because we're trying to say, let's pour it down, pour it down, pour it down, pour it down. You and I think the way we think because we stand on the shoulders of other people who thought, in most cases, better than we thought, if the truth be known. And we are the beneficiaries of them. We're in a long train. Don't get sexy with the gospel, friend. Don't get cute with it. Don't get innovative. Don't get creative with the gospel. It's the same worn thing again and again. We celebrate that God has been really good and really great at rescuing sinners for a long time. And He'll keep doing it. And our job is to keep telling that same old story. Bless the Lord, O my soul. You saw this text last week, but I had to revisit it because of one phrase. Bless the Lord, O my soul. And it's this one. And forget not all His benefits. Don't forget Him. Don't forget Him. Who forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. Just a sidebar. Here's the pulpit. I'm going to step up and just do a little pet peeve podium here. Ready? Young person, listen to me. Okay? You got your life in front of you. You want to live it. You want to have a great time, and you're really focused on that. That's wonderful. There's a danger for you, and that is this. You have resisted becoming well acquainted with your own fallenness. You have resisted becoming well acquainted with your own sinfulness. You lack the appreciation for the depths of your own sin and iniquity. So you hear texts like this and go, forget not all His benefits. I just want to do this. I just want. And you're always looking next, instead of pausing and recognizing that the only way you can have a vital life moving forward is the realization that without Christ there is no vitality whatsoever. And you need the you reconstituted that happens to the world rather than you conquering the world. Don't miss that your whole life starts with the realization that you're in need of the gospel. Finally, our rescue includes the ongoing provision of welfare and peace. In verse 3, for Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Ahasuerus, and he was great among the Jews, popular with the multitude of his brothers, for he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his people. Tob, the welfare of his people, is a word that means basically good, pleasing, agreeable. He's agreeable. He spoke things that were pleasing. He helped his people live a life in civil society, but he sought their peace. That's shalom. It's a big, huge term. It's like hesed in the Old Testament. Big term, multi-layered, right? Peace, yeah, but like to say shalom was a holistic sense of well-being, that all your life would be ordered in a way that is well. You come to Christ, and Christ's rescue to you includes the provision. Not that you'll never have trouble. Not that you'll never enter affliction. Calvin called affliction God's rods for a reason. Okay? But, that in the midst of all that, you will have well-being and peace, shalom. Jesus came along, and He said, peace I leave with you, my peace I give. See that? I'm leaving it with you guys, he says. I'm leaving it. In that same context, chapter 14, 15, 16 of John, it's all baked in the Holy Spirit. He talks all about the Spirit, this comforter who comes. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. John 16, 33. I've said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. I love that. In the world you have tribulation. Don't miss it. I'm not telling you it's all going to be great. What I'm telling you is it's going to be hard, but you'll have peace. But take heart. I've overcome the world. That's why you can have peace, because he has overcome the world. I close reading a paragraph from a book called 5 Festal Garments, and it looks at the 5, what are called the 5 scrolls. Megillot. Esther is one of them. And a concluding statement by Barry Webb. I love this statement. I want to read it to you. The book of Esther is indeed a festive garment. A garment to put on when we are astonished once again at some unexpected way God has rescued us, and when we are ready to celebrate. But it's also a garment to put on when the forces arrayed against us seem all powerful. When to laugh may be the only way to stay sane. To put this garment on, however, is not to whistle in the dark or to pretend that things are other than they are. It is to clothe ourselves with the truth that God is sovereign and to be reminded that he is always with us, even when he seems most absent, and that nothing can ultimately thwart his purposes. To put on Esther is to affirm that God is our deliverer and to share in the laughter of heaven. Father, I pray that you would help us to put on the garment that we have seen over the last several weeks in the book of Esther. A garment that reminds us that where destruction awaits, your deliverance is right behind. A garment that reminds us that when we feel alone, your subtle sovereignty is on the move and you are at work. A garment that reminds us that no ounce of affliction is ever wasted. A garment that reminds us that though the hour may be darkest, the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ is just over the horizon. And so, God, we pray that you would help us to revel in the gospel that has rescued us, but extend that reveling even beyond that into the peace, well-being, shalom that we can experience in the midst of tribulation in a life, knowing that you and you alone, our great God and rescuer, will one day allow it all to come to fruition in the laughter of heaven. In Jesus' name, amen.